I just had the opportunity to teach my two good buddies who play Wingspan quite a bit, the game Finspan. So what we'd like to do is share with you today who it's for. We'll compare it to Wingspan, differences, similarities. We'll look at the mechanisms with my mechanism expert. We'll cover the theme, and we'll also give you our final review and our final thoughts. This is Legendary Tactics. So thank you for playing this game with me.
Yeah, it was great.
It's interesting because we haven't played this game a whole lot, but you are a player who generally doesn't like really light games. So I'm really curious what your thoughts at the end of the video will be, because you're a heavier strategy, more of a war gamer. Yeah. You tend to be a bit of a Euro gamer.
Right.
And I feel like some of the games you play can be lighter because you often incorporate your kids. So we'll get to their thoughts at the end of the video. First, we'd like to thank Noble Knight. They are wonderful sponsors of this video, and they have all kinds of games. This is a game I actually picked up from Noble Knight.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
Really easy process. I traded in a game, I packaged it up, sent it off to them. They gave me a quote and said, yeah, this is how much we'll give you, and they would either do trade-in value or they would do a payout. And so I did the trade-in, and I got Finspan.
Nice. In return.
And not a bad acquisition.
It was wonderful.
Great.
So that was really cool. So let's begin with who the game is for. I think this is a really nice, light introductory level game. If you like Wingspan, this is an easier entry point. So kids can learn this very quickly. When I taught you guys this game, we just started playing, and I said, on your turn, you have two options. Your option is place a fish or dive down one of the columns. And how I love teaching this game is that the person who's playing says, well, how do I play a fish? And then you say, well, here's the cost. And they're like, well, so I need a card. How do I get a card? And they say, well, that's what this first column is for. Oh, and then they're like, but now I need an egg. So how do I get an egg? That's what this
second column
is for.
is.
Yeah. And then in some of the cards, you need a fish for it. And the little baby fish, and then that's what this column is for. So there's essentially three simple columns.
Which progress.
And
there's a nice progression.
That's right. As you build fish into it, if you're familiar with Wingspan, you know that the brown powers will build on what triggers as you dive down the depths to the bottom. So I would say that this game is for some... Is it for a fisherman? We'll get to that a little later in the review. Let's go over to Cax. Can you tell us more about comparisons to Wingspan?
Yeah, so if you are a fan of Wingspan or have played it, I feel like you're going to be able to jump into this game pretty quickly. There's a lot of overlap. But what I love about this game is that there's enough kind of standalone on its own that kind of really makes it shine on its own merits.
Like what?
Particularly the resource management bit. So of course we had that very intricately designed die roller in Wingspan. That is no longer here. The resource management is all basically your own undertaking, your own doing, and you kind of control your own fate on that end, which I really kind of like. That takes the random variable factor out of the equation. So I think that's one area this game really kind of cleaned up, that kind of just randomness.
Yeah, because you've got cards as a resource, fish as a resource, and eggs as a resource.
Right.
And then you can also eat your own fish.
That's right.
As an extra resource. So,
yeah.
So everything's really compact in terms of the resource management.
Yeah, now it does make you play kind of more to your own board, whereas that resource sharing pile in Wingspan is a little more communal. So that's one area that, it's a give and take. Like, if you're a little more wanting to play a little more almost solitaire board, then that's going to be, you may want to tend toward Finspan, actually.
That's right. No dice in this game.
Nope, no dice.
So that mechanism.
Yeah, but as far as the rest of the goes, like the different rows and the columns and that kind of thing, total crossover and like a real spiritual connection to Wingspan. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit then, how does the mechanism work in the game? So
Well, there is a progression. As you get fish down and you get eggs down, you can hatch them by flipping them over. And then the next step would be to get 3 fish in one space, and then you can trade it in for a school, which is worth more points.
6 points at the end of the game.
6 points versus 1 per youngling here. So, so that was an interesting mechanism. I felt like it gave something extra to do with the fish, because some of the playing some of your cards will require spending young fish here, but outside of that, there wouldn't be a need for them, and so it was a good kind of outlet to to what to do with the fish. It gave you another goal and something probably to spruce up this column, because after you hatch a few eggs, what do you do with the fish? Well, you have movement.
That's right. So strategy wise, you could go for sort of a card development strategy where you're playing a lot of fish. You could go for the egg development strategy, which allows you to play fish, or which turns into schools eventually, or of course you could hatch them and join them up. So lots of different options for pathways there.
Yeah, and that was interesting.
You also use card tucking over here.
Yes, they have card tucking, which is obviously would be familiar to Wingspan players, but it's kind of interesting because you're not just tucking; you're actually eating a fish. So if you're eating a smaller fish, you may give up those victory points in exchange for a larger fish, which would get you extra victory points. But some fish are carnivores or whatever, and that's how they get on the board, is by consuming another fish. You also have some base fish here, which I thought was kind of interesting. The tiny ones that you can use either to store eggs in the beginning or just as an easy mark to get one of the predators down.
That's right.
So yeah, that was kind of an interesting mechanism.
Nice that early in the game you can play the smaller fish, but then as you get better resource development, then you can start to replace those little garbage ones that maybe you got a one-time benefit from them, and now you don't need them anymore. So
get a set of predator on them.
That's right, because you can see like you're full up here, I'm full up here. So what do you do with a fish that can only be played
in the
top,
sunshine?
If they're a predator.
Yeah, because there's 3 zones as well. There's the sunny zone, the Twilight Zone here, and then you've got the deep dark depths of the sea.
And we also have sort of 3 different habitats, the blue zone, the purple, and the green zone. And so they need to sort of fit, unless they're a neutral card like this one.
Yeah, some of the cards have a stripe down the side, which means they can only be played on, it has to match if you see the blue
certain
line
columns.
here. So there's a little bit of management on that side of things. Most cards I found were playable because they don't have those stripes. So you can still design your tableau with some freedom.
That's right. But the game is very intuitive in terms of, like I noticed when I was teaching you the game, you'd say, oh, how do I know where I can play them? And then I said, oh, just look at the stripe. And you'd be like, oh, there it is.
Right.
And it becomes very apparent. Or how do I know which zone they go in? And the icons are all on the left. So at first it might feel a little daunting when you see all this iconography. But if you know Wingspan, and if you're playing with somebody who knows the game, they can just guide you through your first game. And usually by the end of the first game, I think that's when people start to feel, now I get it, let's play again.
Yeah, right. And I feel like, even though it's early going, I didn't play terribly. I think the system is forgiving enough that for newer players, maybe you could really play an awful game and ruin everything, but there's enough kind of little rewards and so forth. You could misplay it, I suppose, but in general, if you're semi-competent at board gaming, I think you'll be able to figure it out and play a decent game at least.
Your big mistake was playing the pork fish.
Oh,
it sounded delicious.
But speaking of which, I love that Finspan carries on in that tradition and that vein of the theme of the fish theme. And so
you're a fisherman.
I do, yeah. and you know what? A lot of fish I had never heard of, and but a lot of fish I would recognize, didn't know the name. And even for me, it was like, oh, cool, that's what it's called, or I recognize that, and oh, that's what it is. Yeah, so if you're at all intrigued by any fish of any kind, then this game is going to really strike a nerve. You'll
Flash,
like it.
what were your thoughts on the theme?
Well, what Wingspan did for ornithology, where suddenly people who didn't care about birds suddenly cared about birds quite a bit. This one, I love that there's flavor text on each of the cards. So, for instance, the false cat shark, even though it's long, narrow cat-like eyes, it is not a cat shark. It's much larger and has hundreds of tiny teeth. So, for people, I know my daughter playing this game would probably be more interested in the fish than the actual mechanisms of the game. So this game, I think, would I play it with a fisherman? Yeah, I absolutely would, because I imagine fishermen would be like, oh, I caught one of those once. And they would have a story to tell, and I think that would amplify the game.
Absolutely.
So thematically, I really like it. I also like that instead of moving horizontally in Wingspan as birds, you might consider them their flight path. You're diving down into the depths, and so I really like that slight change just to echo the theme of diving into the ocean. So it's really nice how it triggers all the way down, and you get the benefits of exploring. And so to me, it brings that theme a little bit more into the game.
Yep.
So final thoughts. I want to start. Let's start with you because I'm really curious what you're going to say to this.
Yeah, as am I actually. Yeah.
So where do you stand with this game?
I really like it. I think it's a good game, and it has that same kind of feeling. You get to the end of the turn, you're like, oh, I just wish I had one more turn, and
Yes.
I love that kind of emotion. You're like, wanting just a little bit more, and I feel like games that can evoke that feeling strike a right pitch.
And you almost filled your board, and I almost filled mine, but not quite.
Quite.
So there's just a little bit of room for improvement.
Right. Yeah. So I think
out of 10?
8.
8. Pretty solid.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a good game.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah.
And our final verdict from
Final
the
verdict.
harshest critic I know of this type of game.
Yeah. No, I really liked it. I think it's a clever twist on the Wingspan game franchise. I guess, can we call it a franchise now?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them.
Yeah.
Triplets.
I disagree a little bit, and this isn't a critique. I don't think it is easier than Wingspan, but I don't think it's that much easier than Wingspan that you could start this game with someone who is a non-gamer. Right. I think you need to be a gamer to really appreciate this. I could see non-gamers being a bit overwhelmed. It is for this type of game, for someone who enjoys board games, this will be an easy entry point. I totally agree. Yeah. But I don't think this is something that someone just would come in off the street and they'd be able to follow it.
To offer a counterpoint to that, if I handed this box to kids or non-gamers, I absolutely agree with you. They would just be blown away and be like, I don't know what to do with
but
this.
you have to assume that. You can't assume they're going to have... They see the picture, it's got a cute box of the fish on the flying fish on the front, and they're like, ooh, that looks interesting, that looks fun, and then they open up the rules and they're like, oh my gosh, what is
overwhelmed.
Here's a question though. Could you teach this game to your own kids? Could you teach it to one of your parents who are absolute non-gamers?
I think my parents would be overwhelmed. My kids might be okay with it, actually, but they're not really gamers either, and I don't know if they would have the patience necessarily for
It may be a bit of a challenge just to get them engaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but it's not a critique. It's just I want people to realize this is not like a Ticket to Ride or something like that.
That's fair.
You know, and I think that you have to be careful with that. If you're fired up about Finspan, you bring that to your grandparents or whatever. They may be like, oh, what the heck's going on? So that's my just an observation more than anything.
One of the worst things you can do is have someone just feel frustrated the entire time that they don't understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they don't feel like they're being competitive in any way.
Yeah. But overall, I think the game is clever. I think it is a very elegant and streamlined design. I think the fish and the strategy and everything came together as a brain burn. I felt actually it's fairly similar to Wingspan. I felt like the decision space was about the same, but with simpler mechanisms. No dice, no luck. You really had to plan ahead, but it wasn't so much of a brain burner that I feel like I gotta go and have a nap now.
Right. So I just have one critique of the game. So I like the game. This is one that I want to keep in my collection, and I'll add in, the 3 box. I've got Wormspan as well. The 3 boxes will look really nice, and I think each one has a place. But my one critique is that more so than Wingspan, this is multiplayer solo. You were playing your board. Like, we could all just go ahead. I actually left in our last game for
NATO
10 minutes. They just kept on playing without me. I got back and they're like, oh, you have to do 3 turns. But there's no competition for face-up fish, which is huge in Wingspan.
Right.
When that one comes up that you want that bird, you got to go for it.
Yeah.
And in this game, you can just play your own board, and that's intentional. So if you are a person who likes to just compete against yourself, oh look, I got a higher score than I did last time. There's very little. The only interaction really between us are these cards here.
I'll push back a little on that.
Please do.
Yeah. So, like, for example, my longfish the longfin batfish here. If activated, all players do draw.
Right.
So there are some cards put in, and I know you had a card where I would spawn some. We all spawned eggs. So there are times where there is.
But if Flash wasn't here, we would have just gone like this.
True. Or we could have spawned an egg effect. However,
and it wouldn't have influenced the play.
I don't even have to be here.
Exactly.
But there is some cross pollination in the game.
Yeah, it's fairly minimal. But if you're looking for a game where everyone's going to talk and all that, I mean, higher level strategy players might be looking and going, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing? And how do I... But there's very little you can do to influence consciously the other person's board.
That is true. I'll grant you that,
But you know what? For some people, that's not a negative. Yeah. That is an absolute...
It's just an observation.
We're just
not a
really competitive. Yeah,
and it is a
noticed that.
beautiful game. Like that was the one thing, like just the beautiful artwork of the game and the
Yes.
detail of the different fish. I feel like
I'd be looking forward to if they do a souped up reissue of it
Designer
down the,
edition,
some sort of, I don't know, Kickstarter upgrade
Right.
thing. You could have some really cool
There's
like
tokens
wooden
and
eggs
eggs
and little wooden fish and
Right.
I think you could soup it up and it would actually look pretty cool.
really sharp. Yeah.
That's
Even
great. Well,
better.
thank you so much for joining us on Legendary Tactics. Make sure you get out there
Get gaming.
And be legendary.